A reading from Walden The Village. After hoeing, or perhaps reading and writing in the forenoon, I usually bathed again in the pond, swimming across one of its coves for a stint, and washed the dust of labor from my person, or smoothed out the last wrinkle which study had made, and for the afternoon was as absolutely free. Every day or two I strolled to the village to hear some of the gossip which is incessantly going around on there, circulating either from mouth to mouth or from newspaper to newspaper, and which, taken in homeopathic doses, was really as refreshing in its way as the rustle and of the leaves and the peeping of the frogs, as I walked in the woods to see the birds and squirrels. So I walked in the village to see the men and boys. Instead of the wind among the pines, I heard the carts rattle. In one direction from my house, there was a colony of muskrats in the river meadows, under the grove of elms and buttonwoods and other horizon was a village of busy men, as curious to me as they had been prairie dogs, each sitting at the mouth of his burrow or running over to a neighbor's to gossip. I went there frequently to observe their habits. The village appeared to me a great newsroom, and on one side to support it, as once at Redding and Company's on State Street they kept nuts and raisins or salt and meal and other groceries. Some have such a vast appetite for the former commodity, that is, the news, and such sound digestive organs, that they can sit forever in public avenues without stirring and let it simmer and whisper through them like Atesian winds, or as if in healing ether, it only producing numbness and instability to pain. Otherwise, it would often be painful to hear, without affecting the consciousness. I hardly ever failed when I rambled through the village to see a row of such worthies either sitting on a ladder, sunning themselves with their bodies inclined forward and their eyes glancing along the line this way and that from time to time without voluptuous expression, or else leaning against a barn with their hands in their pockets like caryatides, as if to prop it up. They, being commonly out of doors, heard whatever was in the wind. They are the coarsest mills, in which all gossip is first rudely digested or cracked up before it is emptied into finer and more delicate hoppers within doors. I observed that the vitals of the village were the grocery, the barroom, the post office, and the bank, and as a necessary part of the machinery, they kept a bell, a big gun, and a fire engine at convenient places, and the houses were so arranged as to make the most of mankind in lanes and fronting one another, so that every traveler had to run the gauntlet, and every man, woman, and child might get a lick at him. Of course, those who were stationed nearest to the herd of the line, where they could most see and be seen and have the first blow at him, paid the highest prices for their places, and the fewest straggling inhabitants in the outskirts where long gaps in the line began to occur, and the traveler could get over walls or turn aside into cow paths and so escape, paid a very slight ground or widow tax. Signs were hung out on all sides to allure him, some to catch him by the appetite as a tavern and victualling cellar, some by the fancy as a dry goods store and the jeweler's, others by the hair or the feet or the skirts as the barber, the shoemaker, or the tailor. Besides, there was a still more terrible standing invitation to call at every one of these houses, and company expected about these times. For the most part, I escaped wonderfully from these dangers, either by proceeding at once boldly and without deliberation to the goal, as is recommended to those who run the gauntlet, or by keeping my thoughts on high things, like Orpheus, who, loudly singing to the praises of the gods to his lyre, drowned the voices of the sirens and kept out of danger. Sometimes I bolted suddenly, and nobody could tell my whereabouts, for I did not stand much about gracefulness, and never hesitated at a gap in a fence. I was even accustomed to make an interruption into some houses where I was well entertained, and after learning the kernels and very last civil of news, what had subsided, the prospects of war and peace, and whether the world was likely to hold together much longer, I was let out through the near avenues, and so escaped to the woods again. It was very pleasant, when I stayed late in town, to launch myself into the night, especially if it was dark and tempestuous, and set sail from bright village parlor or lecture room, with a bag of rye or Indian meal upon my shoulder, for my snug harbor in the woods, having made all tight without, and with drawn under hatches with merry crew of thoughts, leaving only my outer man at the helm, or even tying up the helm when it was plain sailing. I had many a genial thought by cabin fire as I sailed. I was never cast away nor distressed in any weather, though I encountered some severe storms. It is darker in the woods, even in the common nights, than most suppose. I frequently had to look up at the opening between the trees above a path, in order to learn my route, and where there was no cart path, to feel with my feet the faint track which I had worn, or steer by the known relation of particular trees which I had felt with my hands, passing between two pines, for instance, not more than 18 inches apart in the midst of the woods. Invariably, in the darkest night, sometimes after coming home thus late in a dark and muggy night, when my feet felt the path which my eyes could not see, dreaming and absent-minded all the way, until I was aroused by having to raise my hand to lift the latch, I have not been able to recall a single step of my walk, and I have thought that perhaps my body would find its way home if its master should forsake it, as a hand finds its way to the mouth without assistance. Several times, when a visitor chanced to stay into the evening, and it proved a dark night, I was obliged to conduct him to the cart path in the rear of the house, and then point out to him the direction he was to pursue, and in keeping which he was to be guided rather by his feet than his eyes. One very dark night, I directed thus on their way two young men who had been fishing in the pond. They lived about a mile off through the woods, and were quite used to the route. A day or two after, one of them told me they wandered about greater part of the night close by their own premises, and did not get home till toward morning, by which time, as there had been several heavy showers in the meanwhile, and the leaves were very wet, they were drenched to their skins. I have heard of many going astray, even in the village streets, when the darkness was so thick that you could cut it with a knife. As the saying is, some who live in the outskirts, having come to town a shopping in their wagons, have been obliged to put for the night, and gentlemen and ladies making a call have gone half a mile out of their way, feeling the sidewalk only with their feet, and knowing that when they return, it is surprising and memorable as well as valuable an experience to be lost in the woods any time. Often in a snowstorm, even by day, one will come out upon a well-known road and yet find it impossible to tell which way leads to the village. Though he knows that he has traveled it 1,000 times, he cannot recognize a feature in it, but it is as strange to him as if it were a road to Siberia. Were a road in Siberia. By night, of course, the perplexity is infinitely greater. In our most trivial walks, we are constantly, though unconsciously, steering like pilots by certain well-known beacons and headlands, and if we go beyond our usual course, we still carry in our minds the bearing of some neighboring cape, and not till we are completely lost or turned around, for a man needs only to be turned round once with his eyes shut in this world to be lost. Do we appreciate the vastness and strangeness of nature? Every man has to learn the points of compass again as often as he wakes, whether from sleep or any abstraction, not till we are lost. In other words, not till we have lost the world do we begin to find ourselves and realize where we are and the infinite extent of our relations. One afternoon, near the end of the first summer, when I went to the village to get a shoe from the cobblers, I was seized and put into jail because, as I have elsewhere related, I did not pay a tax to or recognize the authority of the state, which buys and sells men, women, and children like cattle at the door of its Senate house. I had gone down to the woods for other purposes, but whether a man goes, men will pursue and paw him with their dirty institutions, and if they can constrain him to belong to their desperate old fellow society. It is true, I might have resisted forcibly with more or less effect, might have run amuck against society, but I preferred that society should run amuck against me, it being the desperate party. However, I was released the next day, obtained my mended shoe, and returned to the woods in season to get my dinner of huckleberries on Fair Haven Hill. I was never molested by any person but those who represented the state. I had no lock nor bolt, but for the desk which held my papers, not even a nail to put over my latch or windows. I never fastened my door night or day, though I was to be absent several days, not even when the next fall I spent a fortnight in the woods of Maine, and yet my house was more respected than if it had been surrounded by a file of soldiers. The tired rambler could rest and warm himself by my fire. The literary amuse himself with the few books on my table, or the curious, by opening my closet door, see was left of my dinner and what prospect I had of supper. Yet though many people of every class came this way to the pond, I suffered no serious inconvenience from these sources, and I never missed anything but one small book, a volume of Homer, which perhaps was improperly gilded, and this I trust a soldier of our camp has found by this time. I am convinced that if all men were to live as simply as then I did, thieving and robbery would be unknown. These take place only in communities where some have got more than is sufficient while others have not enough. The Pope's homers would soon get properly distributed. Nec bella furunt, vagnus acebat dum siffis ante dapes. Nor wars did men molest, when only beechen bowels were in request. Who will govern public affairs? What need have you to employ punishments? Love virtue, and the people will be virtuous. The virtues of a superior man are like the wind. The virtues of a common man are like the grass. The grass, when the wind passes over it, bent